I used to believe in love. I used to believe in family. But if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. My name is Valerie, and this is the story of how my husband betrayed me, stole everything I had, and married the one person I trusted the most, my twin sister. For 5 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. Daniel was charming, intelligent, and ambitious. He knew how to make me feel special, always showering me with attention in the beginning. We weren't just husband and wife, we were business partners. I owned a successful real estate company and he managed the finances. I trusted him completely. And why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my best friend, the man who promised to love me forever. Then there was Vanessa, my twin sister. We were inseparable growing up. She was the only person in the world who truly understood me, or so I thought. We shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams. I never imagined she would be the one to shatter my life into pieces. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. It started with little things. Daniel would come home late, claiming he was busy with work. He'd put his phone on silent whenever he was around me. He used to tell me everything, but suddenly he became distant. Vanessa, who had always been my biggest supporter, also changed. She started canceling our plans, claiming she was busy with personal stuff. She barely returned my calls, and when we did talk, she always seemed distracted. I told myself I was overthinking things. I convinced myself that Daniel was just stressed from work and that Vanessa was caught up in her own life. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something wasn't right. Then came the night everything fell apart. It was a regular Tuesday. I had a meeting in the morning and decided to come home early to surprise Daniel. I even picked up his favorite dinner. As I walked into the house, I heard laughter. His deep, familiar voice mixed with another. A voice I knew too well. Vanessa. My heart pounded. Why was she here? I stepped closer to the bedroom, my hands shaking. The door was slightly open, and what I saw made my blood turn cold. Daniel and Vanessa were wrapped in each other's arms, laughing, whispering, completely lost in their own world. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. Daniel noticed me first. He froze, his face draining of color. Vanessa turned slowly, and for a split second I saw something in her eyes. Shock, maybe even guilt. But then to my horror she smirked. You weren't supposed to find out this way, she said casually, as if she had just borrowed my dress without asking. I felt like my entire world had crumbled beneath me. My husband, my sister, the two people I loved the most had been lying to me. Daniel stood up, his expression unreadable. Valerie, let's not make this dramatic. It's over. I've filed for divorce. His words hit me like a slap. Divorce? He had already made up his mind? I turned to Vanessa, hoping for some kind of explanation, some sign that this wasn't real. But she just shrugged. Oh, come on. You had to see this coming. Daniel and I are meant to be together. The casual way she said it made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, cry, do something. But I was paralyzed with shock. Daniel reached out as if he was comforting me. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't just betrayal. This had been planned. Carefully. Ruthlessly. Daniel and Vanessa hadn't just fallen for each other. They had been plotting this behind my back for God knows how long. The man I had trusted with my heart. The sister I had shared my entire life with. They had stolen my love. But what I didn't know yet was that they were about to steal so much more. I could barely think straight after that night. My whole world had collapsed in an instant, and I was left standing in the ruins trying to make sense of it all. But the pain of betrayal wasn't even the worst part. What came next was even more devastating. The divorce papers arrived the next morning. It was as if Daniel had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Everything had already been arranged. The documents were neatly prepared, leaving no room for argument. He wanted the house, the cars, and half of my business assets. But what truly sent a chill down my spine was the realization that he had already been transferring funds from my accounts into his own. I sat in my office, staring at my bank statements, my hands trembling as I flipped through pages of transactions I hadn't authorized. My accounts were nearly empty. Tens of thousands of dollars. Gone. And it wasn't just Daniel. Vanessa's name was all over the transactions too. They had been stealing from me for months, maybe even longer. I clenched my fists, my body shaking with rage. How had I been so blind? How had I let the two people I trusted the most rob me in broad daylight? I grabbed my phone and called Daniel. He answered after a few rings, his voice calm, too calm. "Valerie, I was expecting your call," he said as if this was just another business deal to him. "Where's my money, Daniel?" I demanded, my voice barely controlled. He sighed as if he was the victim here. "Val, let's not be emotional. You know as well as I do that marriage is a partnership. What's yours is mine." I felt my throat tighten. "You stole from me. You emptied my accounts and now you expect me to just accept it." There was a brief pause. Then in the coldest voice I had ever heard from him he said, "You'll bounce back. You always do." And then he hung up. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was war. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Later that week I received a letter from my bank. Someone had maxed out my credit cards. Lavish hotel stays, expensive dinners, designer clothes. Tens of thousands more in debt, all charged under my name. I didn't even need to ask who it was. Daniel and Vanessa weren't just satisfied with taking my money. They wanted to leave me with nothing. I felt sick. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was destruction. They had planned this down to the smallest detail, making sure I had no escape, no way to fight back. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to sit back and let them win. They thought they had taken everything from me, but what they didn't realize was that I still had something they could never steal: my strength. I wiped my tears, straightened my shoulders, and took a deep breath. This wasn't over. Not even close. I spent days in shock, replaying every moment, every conversation, every little sign I had ignored. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Daniel and Vanessa hadn't just betrayed me on a whim. This was planned. Carefully. Coldly. They had been setting me up for months and I had walked right into their trap. But if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they were wrong. I started by going through every document, every financial statement, and every contract I had ever signed with Daniel. I consulted lawyers, accountants, anyone who could help me make sense of what had happened. And the more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Daniel had forged my signature on multiple financial documents, transferring property and assets into his name without my consent. He had also manipulated our business finances, slowly draining money while keeping me distracted with other things. But the most shocking part? He had done it all legally, at least on paper. I felt sick. This wasn't just about greed. This was about destroying me. Then one evening while going through old emails, I found something that made my blood run cold. An email from Vanessa. It wasn't meant for me. It was a forwarded message buried deep in my inbox. She had sent it to Daniel months ago, before I had discovered their affair. She has no idea. I almost feel bad, but honestly she deserves it. You and I were meant to have this life, not her. Soon she'll have nothing and we'll have everything. I stared at the words, my whole body trembling. She had planned this all along. My own sister. The person I had shared my entire life with. He had never loved me. He had envied me. Hated me even. I felt something inside me shift. The pain, the heartbreak, it all turned to something else. Determination. They wanted to take everything from me? Fine. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I started making calls. I reached out to my most powerful business contacts, the ones Daniel had always ignored, thinking they were beneath him. I told them everything, how he had stolen from me, how he had committed fraud. And to my surprise, many of them had already suspected something shady about him. Word spread quickly. Investors started pulling out of his new projects. Business partners began distancing themselves. One by one his deals crumbled. Then I took it a step further. With the help of my lawyers, I gathered enough evidence to take him to court. I filed lawsuits for fraud, forgery, and financial abuse. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for the battle. But just when I thought I had everything under control, something happened that I didn't expect. I received an invitation. A wedding invitation. Daniel and Vanessa were getting married. The audacity. The nerve. I stared at the elegant gold lettering, bile rising in my throat. But then an idea formed in my mind. They thought they had won. They thought they had destroyed me. But they had no idea what was coming. I smiled, setting the invitation down. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. The day of their wedding arrived faster than I expected. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need an invitation. I had no intention of sitting at home while the two people who destroyed my life celebrated their so-called victory. While Vanessa was getting dressed in her stolen white gown and Daniel was preparing his vows filled with lies, I was making my final move. Over the past few weeks, my lawyers had been working nonstop and now everything was ready. Daniel thought he was untouchable, that he had covered his tracks well enough to walk away clean. But he had underestimated me. I arrived at the venue dressed in black, my presence turning heads the moment I stepped inside. Whispers filled the air. Some guests were surprised, others uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I walked straight to the front where Daniel and Vanessa stood at the altar, their hands intertwined. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. Daniel stiffened, his smile faltering. But before either of them could react, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police officers stormed in, their voices cutting through the wedding chatter. The entire room froze as two officers approached Daniel. "Daniel Thompson, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and financial embezzlement." Gasps erupted from the guests. Vanessa's face turned pale as she looked between Daniel and the officers, disbelief written all over her features. Daniel stammered, trying to argue, but the evidence against him was solid. They handcuffed him right there in front of everyone. His perfect wedding had turned into his worst nightmare. Vanessa turned to me, anger and desperation in her eyes. "You did this," she hissed. I tilted my head, a smirk playing on my lips. "You're right. And I'm just getting started." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say another word, a lawyer stepped forward. "Vanessa Thompson," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You have been served. Valerie is suing you for identity theft and financial fraud." She gasped, her hands trembling as she grabbed the papers. "You can't do this to me." I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You did this to yourself." The entire wedding was in chaos. Guests whispered, reporters who had been covering the event turned their cameras towards Daniel being escorted out in handcuffs, and Vanessa stood frozen, humiliated and defeated. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them to deal with the mess they had created. Justice had been served and I was finally free. To everyone watching, let this be a lesson. Never underestimate the power of a woman who refuses to be broken. Betrayal may hurt, but revenge is sweeter when it's served cold. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more incredible stories. You won't want to miss what's coming next.